Good evening and welcome to the open session of the Acton Agua Dulce Unified School District Board of Trustees meeting for April 9th, 2020. We have come back from closed session. We are adjourning the open session. We're reconvening the open session at 7:35. I'm going to read the civility statement. Something that we're going to read at every public meeting. When conducting the district's business, we will strive to communicate clearly and concisely with respect for the time of others, listen objectively, carefully considering the opinions of others, understand the counterproductive effects of disruptive, demeaning, and intimidating behaviors, understand and respect district policies and procedures, maintain a respect for the rich history of the district and the efforts of others who have served in the past. I'd like you to know that I've been carrying this around night and day. Wherever I go, my plaque goes with me. Thank you. I'll start my comments by saying, for those of you that are listening by phone, your board president is dressed in a three-piece tailored suit, accessorized smartly with gray boutonniere, cufflinks, and matching lacings in the finest leather shoes you can purchase. That aside, Coach Jorgensen, thank you for your comments. I think they captured some things that I will say maybe not so eloquently with the experience you have with being a dedicated servant to the kids in our district. Thank you for that. Again, Mike, thank you for the experience you bring. You've been through a lot of different things, and I appreciate how you make your comments concisely and get right down to the point of things that are measurable. So I want to thank you. But I want to preface what I'm about to say by letting everyone know that I care very deeply about this district, its future, and I care most importantly about the future of the students of this district. As I alluded to last year during graduation, there's nothing better than standing on a stage and watching the hope of this community go out into the world. And everybody knows Acton by the excellence of our youth. That's how people know what Acton's really all about. So the last two board meetings, I've talked about COVID, and I'm going to make my comments here. Again, I am the board president, so I think it's important that I make my expectations known and deal with some of the questions and comments that I've had coming in. That will include some comments that were given to me by Danielle Henry. Danielle, I hope you're joining us. If not, you'll watch later. And I do appreciate the Henry family as they continue to be the major contributor to the district's ADA. I very much appreciate that. Keep up the good work along those lines. But my last two meetings, first 2 meetings ago, I reminded everyone that we are a seat-based system, meaning that a group of kids attend a classroom with a live, physically present teacher, or several, that the kids rotate between, depending on the grade level. The students learn a paced, state and board-approved curriculum. The role of the teacher is to present the curriculum in a way that is clear and to individualize the presentation of the curriculum to facilitate learning in a way that reaches the most of the students, and they may have diverse learning abilities. In some cases, IEPs are formulated to further accommodate students who require additional support. I think a measure of our success in this district is the number of parents who either put their kids on a bus or brave the drop-off and pickup each day are the real indicators of whether or not we are holding our market share of students. I think that's pretty simple. So our seat-based model has had a demand historically, again, using those measures. That said, we always want to keep in mind that the goal of public education, listen carefully, the goal of public education is to prepare students for further education and ultimately a successful independent life in society. I want everybody to understand the paychecks, benefits, and the plaques with board members' names that go on buildings are secondary to that, and we should always remember that. At the last board meeting, my comments went along the lines of reminding everyone that our staff are people, just like us, that are going through the same things that we are going through, maybe some better, possibly some worse. And then we have to add in that they are taking our kids, classrooms of kids, 5 days a week, and take on the challenge of managing those kids in addition to everything else that all of us are going through. And then add in, we're going to do this in an entirely new way that you're not familiar with, you might not even support, and have serious questions about. But in summary, I ask that everyone be patient and exercise civility when you're dealing with or talking about the staff of this district. I take it as an insult when you do not. But now we've had some time to think about what's happening, and the reality is setting in. So now it's time for some action. I want to touch on two areas this evening. One is a world, I think in education you've got stuff that's checked the box, and then you've got some other stuff that's not checked the box. So for example, if you are going to operate a public school, when the County Office of Education wants your budget report, you file it. They check the box. If you do not file it, you will not be in business very long. So there are hundreds of other examples that I won't bore you with, but I will tell you that I think another check the box is, if I am going to go to school for 12 or 13 years and do the work, and I think our kids are doing the work because I don't see the parents, for the most part, walking in the building and dogging the staff every day to make sure that the kids are doing the work. I think the teachers do the work, and I think the kids do the work, and I think there's a symbiotic relationship, and I think the teachers are more mentors to the kids than enforcers. So I think the plan works good, but at the end of it, if I'm going to put 12 or 13 years in, that is my career as a young person growing up, and I expect a paycheck, and that paycheck is my diploma. So you can put the diploma in the email, you can put it, I don't hand it out a window with a hazmat suit on, and you check the box, right? No, I don't think so. So the part of this idea of all this is, whether a promotion or graduation, is the community celebrating the goals of education I just told you about a minute ago. It's further education, and it's taking your place as a successful citizen in society. That's what it's about. And at graduation, there's a moment when you stand on the stage and you realize, I have done a great deal of work, mostly by myself, with the aid of my teachers, who again are really more like mentors than anything else. And I get a second to celebrate my work. And then, if anybody that's graduated, it hits you. It might hit you right then. It might hit you a day later. It might hit you a year later. It might hit you 10 years later when your parents finally throw you off their couch. But it hits you that, wait a minute, I'm done with this, but I start a brand new world tomorrow morning, and I am at the bottom of the food chain. I get to start over. I'm the least experienced one at college. I'm the least experienced one in the workforce. And I remember that being a very scary thing to me. And I think that sometimes you might have, the only thing in your gas tank to fight that fear is somebody out there clapping and yelling your name. And I think that the physical graduation and commencement ceremonies and proms are a very, very important thing to fueling someone into their next phase of life. And I'm not a box checker in this area, so I guarantee you we will have a ceremony. There will be a prom. There will be an 8th grade commencement. So maybe that we should realize, I think a lot of this stuff has been planned out already. In fact, I think prom would have already happened successfully. We'd be talking about how nice it was right now, had this thing, but somebody planned all this, and it wasn't me, and that was really the hard part, okay? So where I come from, let's say you want to get married, right? And you plan all this stuff, and it rains the day you get married. So what do? Just not get married? Some people would like to have that opportunity again, but I won't talk about that. But no, you replan your wedding and you get married, right? So here's what I'm saying. I think you got this stuff planned. I think there's some stuff that takes last second preparation. You got to buy this, you got to do that. And I think you got an idea of, is that a few days? Is it a few weeks? What is it? And so you know that if they were to drop this quarantine thing tomorrow, you might not be able to have the ceremony for a month. But I think with it planned, and I think with some of the agreements that we talk about that are in place already, you might just call up the person who's going to have this place there and say, you know what, do you have a couple days in July that we could do this. And maybe July comes up and it's not working out. So start figuring out what's in August, but we've got to have these kids walking across the stage. And I think most of the heavy lifting is done. So let's look at this about not as what we can't do or some trendy way of handing out diplomas, but we need to have this. I guarantee you one thing, they will have the ceremony by themselves with or without us, and I guarantee you one thing, as the president of the school board this year, I will be there when they cross the stage, wherever that stage is and whatever it means. And I would like to share Mrs. Henry's comments. It opens up with, unfortunately, Miss Henry is an Aries just like me. Not that we're Aries, that's the perfect thing to be, but this hit on her birthday. I think in the middle of the birthday party, she got the message from the district, and I think it was a sobering moment because our family has kids that are going to go through a commencement ceremony in one school and a graduation with the other. So I'm not going to get into this deep stuff, but she says to the board members and the district administration, I'm begging for you all to consider postponing all senior activities and graduation ceremonies, not to cancel or hold virtually. I want the real deal. This is more than just money that we invested on tickets, announcements, cap and gown, etc. These are once-in-a-lifetime memories for them, and please remember there are parents who have made significant donations to the senior class. Also, I think you need to know that the prom venue has recently confirmed that there are no refunds will be given, but they are willing to reschedule as far out as needed. But said it clearly states in the contract that under all circumstances, payments are final. I fully believe this is, there's comments about how they conduct business and what's occurring, given what's occurring. But then again, we should not be charging, there's some comments about the cost of things. But this is just another reason. The crux of this is that we've done the work and the venue is saying, hey, I think we can reschedule this. So let's think about when we're going to do this and not some fancy way. And she closes by saying, again, I'm pleading, please give our graduates the opportunity to have what they have worked so hard for. And in my world, the Henry family in Agua Dulce is one of the finest in the community. So thank you for sharing that with us. Let's get into, I know I'm running long here, but these are things I need to say. I want you to know that as parents, when you drop your kid off in the morning and you have the assumption that they will, outside of lunch and break, spend their day with a teacher or several, depending on their grade level. I notice that most parents do not follow their kids into the classroom and for the most part do not dog staff all day about what is going on at the school. Refer back to the part I said earlier about dropping the kids off willingly. So if you drop your kid off for 6 hours, you might just assume that they will be with the teacher for most of that. Now, when the state and feds stop you from dropping your kid off at school, you might just have the idea that when your kid is at home, distance learning looks like, hey, it's 9:05 just like every day, and it's time for your science class, if that's what happens to you at 9:05, and that class lasts 50 minutes. So you'll be watching your teacher on a screen instead of standing in front of the class and delivering the lesson. And then what happens is that lesson is delivered that day, the next lesson is delivered the next day, and thereon, and the curriculum is delivered. But when kids are at home and they cannot see what they perceive as a normal day, I think an explanation at minimum is in order. Parenting are witnessing the change live in their homes, and I think that's where some of the confusion from. Now, I want to talk a little bit about virtual learning. And I'm going to get out in the weeds pretty far here and talk about charters and distance learning. Charters started being authorized for one reason or another. Then political shifts found charters falling out of favor with their authorizers. I don't know, maybe it was competition. Maybe it was funding being bleeding off. I don't know. I can go on for hours about that. So they found some other authorizers far away from East Jesus, Kentucky, Dulce, or even Acton. Then someone said, you can't do that. So it's either shut down your school or take up virtual learning. Some did take up virtual learning and were not effective. Virtual learning and distance learning are somehow overlapping now to mean the same thing. They're not. Others took up virtual learning and failed and were not measurable and found themselves in court, even criminal court, with severe consequences for their authorizers, whether you are seeing that in our newspapers around here or not right now. Believe me, that is happening. On a side note, as Mr. King pointed out, the Valiant hearing has been postponed again as the courtroom is closed. Anyway, the charters that failed are gone, but the ones that did not fail are out there with a 2-year head start on anyone jumping into the virtual world of distance learning. The equivalent of their COVID happened 2 years ago, and believe me, there's a big difference between teaching online and online teaching. Think about that one and let it soak in. Going back to what I said, we are not an online curriculum delivery system. We are a seat-based system, and we purchased, going back to Mike Fox's service and things. Mike has been through a number of curriculum purchases and vetting, and what happens is you purchase a state-approved curriculum from a state-approved vendor, and that process looks like competitive bidding. You don't just pick your brother-in-law or whoever's out there. And we've had a committee of staff looking at things and saying, this is effective, this is not effective. We test this out in the classrooms. So we have purchased some curriculum, and some of that might be pay-as-you-go curriculum. You don't give somebody 10 years of money for a curriculum and then figure out halfway through that it's not being supported. So those are prudent decisions the board and superintendents have made. So the idea that without knowing the duration of this situation and how long distance learning will be our reality, you don't jump into an online curriculum with proper vetting and analysis. You just don't do that. And the longer this goes on, the more likely that possibility might become a reality. But I think the indicator for the prudent might be that the vendors who supply traditional seat-based curriculum, when you see them starting to veer their products towards the virtual environment, that's probably a good indicator for you. Another indicator would be that you're losing your market share of students to other venues. And so I think the quicker that we can flip the screen on at 9:05 and do what we do and show the parents that you haven't been dropping your kid off so they can get 1 hour of education a week from each teacher, and I don't know what they're doing the rest of the time. I don't think that's a fair representation of the efforts of our students or our teachers. Anyway, I wanted to be clear as to my 20% direction as superintendent. I don't believe that we're going to have a board meeting very soon. Is that correct?
That's correct.
So we're going to have one in May.
Correct.
So I think it's about a month away.
Yes.
So between now and then, we've heard some comments for some people, and I appreciate very much that everybody is going to not run up here, I'm gonna. I hear a lot of that. I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that. I would like to be able to see some of the stuff tomorrow up on the district website so people can look at it. But I want the parents who are used to dropping their kids off and knowing that they're going to be there for 6 hours and get a report card, I want them to know that something is happening, and if there are significant changes, including why a teacher cannot fire up the class as usual at the usual time and deliver the curriculum over the computer, I want to know what the obstacles are, and I need them communicated to the parents, starting with the parent groups, along with a milestone of what we can expect and when. Simultaneously, I would like to expect staff to be prepared and informed enough to educate the board about long-distance learning and online systems that approve the curriculum in a measurable way that works towards the goals of public education I referred to earlier. I think that there are some partnerships along the lines of the people in our charter world that have been doing this for some time, and I think they call this thought partnerships or something like that, and I think we might consider getting people in a room together, starting with maybe me and another board member who has an educational experience, and having a chat with some of these people and figuring out how can we get through this until we can get back taking over our role as a seat-based public school. And thank you so much for your patience with my very long comments, and I'll try to keep them short the next. Larry, is it your recommendation of the board that this person is hired?
It is my recommendation that we hire Mr. David Cabello.
Good. As always, this employee is now your baby. I am going to hope that this was the #1 candidate of the board or the panel that recommended or did the interview. Could you describe that panel for us a little bit, please?
Of course. So the interview panel was made up, the initial interview panel, so first we had a paper screening, of course, to go through that, and the panel is made up of parents, classified staff, certificated employees, employees from the school site itself, and administration, district administration.
Wonderful. So I will insist that everyone will support this principal coming in and respect their experience and leadership and the decision of the board to approve the consent agenda this evening to include the hire of the new Meadowlark, sorry Tess, you're the best, the new High Desert principal. With that, called to question on the approval of the consent agenda. I'm taking it that we have four board members, aye, board president, aye. Welcome aboard, sir, 5-0.
Mr. President.
So I think what some of us are used to in different areas of public services, this is something comparable to the Quimby Act, or when another agency calls it a rec and park tax fund. It's meant to collect development fees that benefit the greater part of the community, especially when the school district is not a basic aid district. I understand Mr. Costan's concern because as the Acton Town Council person, you find yourself sometimes in an advisory capacity. People are reminding you, well, you know, we'll take your input, but, you know, when it comes to the next hearing, we'll do that. I would say that the intent of a superintendent's authority, I would think that typically when we're saying that the superintendent has the authority to do certain things, I think we're talking about possibly a temporary air quality issue, a fire, a power outage, a flood, or something like that. And it's not a means of a superintendent to exercise their authority just to say, I have the ability to do this, because that might rub somebody the wrong way. I'm not sure what the intent is or anything like that, but that's kind of my look at the nature of this. I know that people are very concerned about metering out authority to one individual who may be perceived as, through statement, be able to override the board just because that's somewhere written in a bylaw that gives them that type of authority. I don't think that's the intent here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to ask that this resolution be modified to go down to the second part where it says, now therefore it be resolved. The second part of that says, be it further resolved and ordered, the superintendent is delegated authority to take all appropriate action. I'm going to ask that this be modified, and I'm going to call this to vote to insert in between take all appropriate action, to insert the words board approved appropriate action. So I'm going to move that we modify this resolution to include the words board approved. So the second resolution of this would read as such: be it further resolved and ordered, the superintendent's delegated authority to take all board approved appropriate action to respond to the coronavirus COVID-19 pandemic, including but not limited to any action. There's a list of actions. Do I have a second in that modification? Comments? Remember that my opinion does not represent everyone else, and I have gotten out of the habit of the old days of scolding each other and convincing each other. My main concern here is that, let's say, and I do want to say that I think Mr. Costan was very gracious in pointing out that he's not known Mr. King to make bad decisions. This is not about Mr. King or the board, and that we have diverse experience and all that kind of thing. And I think he was very gracious with us there. And I hope we would recognize that. But I think somewhere in here is the idea that giving a superintendent this kind of power, if you go to, say, for example, D, to modify school and work schedules, are you handing somebody arbitrarily the means of violating a work agreement or some MOU under the guise that there's something? So my suggestion to include board approved, as Larry pointed out, is as simple as something major. The prudent superintendent is probably going to call an emergency meeting and say, oh, I think that there's this or possibly that, or up to and including the temporary closure of the entire school district. I would be, if I were in the superintendent's shoes, I would be kind of worried about making a decision like that just because I had the power to, without at least having an emergency board meeting, which is 24 hours notice. If the board's on the other side of the coin, if the superintendent is hampered by board members trying to play politics and appearing to be the savior and pushing one agenda or something out in the public. So I think there's a fine line here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask for call to vote on my suggested amendment. It's nothing personal, and I'm going to do that right now. So again, I will ask that it be amended as I read into the record, and I'm going to ask that that's called to question. My vote matters nonetheless there. 4-0. The board does not wish to entertain the suggested amendment. So now we're going to go back to a vote on the resolution as presented. All right, I will end my comments with this. It looks like our newest board member, Mr. Roki, has found within there that there is some means for the board to tell the superintendent, this is over now. Might be because the COVID virus is over, or it could be that a series of actions or proposed actions aren't in line with the way the board feels the public should be represented. That is my concluding comment. Personally, I don't know that the science textbook adoption, given the fact that we may or may not be in the classroom anytime soon, going back to my comments about a seat-based versus a virtual thing, I don't know that that needs to be on the future agenda items report at all right now. The health science research adoption falls under the same category for me. I don't know that they need to be there. That is my comment. Again, it's the superintendent's option to talk about that. I do think the 90-day plan is a good thing. I remember an assistant superintendent that came in here, and I am going to be very frank here. I do not expect to see another principal at any of my schools anytime soon, and I want to know what measurable things are going to be done to deliver a curriculum either virtually or not virtually, and to get this back to where the parents are understanding I drop my kid off for 6 hours a day, and short of breaks and lunch periods, the kids are working, and now they're sitting in my house, in some cases looking at the television for 45 minutes, and the rest of the day appear not to be doing. I need it communicated from the high level as to what this looks like and what my measurables are. I'm very much on measurables as to what that looks like, especially right now. When it comes to the display of technology, me sitting up here and looking at technology and then trying to verbalize it over what's basically the radio mystery hour, like this meeting is being held tonight, I don't think that does justice to the people that are wanting to know, hey, I just need to know how to get on and do that. So I'm expecting that between now and later, before the next board meeting, that we're seeing some stuff popping up on the internet. I think there's been some of that stuff referenced. I think it's going to show up very quickly, and then I think that by the next meeting, we need to have the capacity to let people sign in and see screen sharing. I don't know if there are other parent group meetings that we can go from a generalized discussion about what the theory of it all and the vernacular looks like, and start doing some things where we're sharing screen and showing what's happening and using the parent group's influence on their partners and fellow parents in the community to get that message out there. But when it comes to this, I would say that the next meeting should have this type of element, but it should be visible live to the community so they can enjoy it as much as we do. So I think that closes the discussion on this. Thank you all.